Welcome, everyone. We're going to be talking about the issues of Project 2025 and Agenda 47 with regard to the climate and environment. So, as I said, this is about the environmental concerns and issues that are found in Project 2025 and Agenda 47. And I'm Carol White Llewellyn. I'm a marketing and media professional, a writer, photographer. I'm on the advisory board of the Rochester Documentary Filmmakers, and I'm going to be co-presenting this evening with Kate Kressman-Kehoe, who is one of the directors and writers of a documentary called Comfort Zone, which explored what the climate change would do to this region, upstate New York. She's also an advisory board member of the Rochester Documentary Filmmakers, and she's a volunteer with the Citizens Climate Lobby. I'm going to start out first just talking about Project 2025 and Agenda 47, because even if you've joined us before and you heard this, this is a really important piece of Project 2025. And we need to keep hammering it on it so people really remember it, so that when you're talking to friends and family, you can keep this in mind to remind them. One of the pillars of Project 2025 is that they want to put all of the power with the president. It's not going to be disseminated out as it's supposed to be according to the Constitution. It's going to be basically seated with the president. The folks who wrote 2025 have developed a personnel database of loyalists. It's basically a LinkedIn loyalist group. And they've actually developed a presidential administration academy that they are using to train all these people so that they will be ready to move on day one if Trump is elected. During the debate, former President Trump said he didn't know about Project 2025, but this is obviously not the truth because it's the Republican playbook, and J.D. Vance is a player on the Heritage Foundation, which is the organization that basically wrote it and put it out there, disseminated it. Many of the policies that are in there were implemented the last time, and it was written by over 100 former Trump staffers and administrative people. He is mentioned in there 300 times, actually over 300 times, and the Republicans plan to put this into action on day one. So they are set to go to take this and run with it. Last time Donald Trump was in office, the Trump administration was one of the most anti-environmental, anti-climate, anti-public health administration we've ever had by far. And this is according to Tiernan Sittenfeld, who is involved with the League of Conservation Voters and the sources Inside Climate News. So basically what they tend to do is bury all of the issues on climate change and gut environmental protections. And how are they going to do this? I'm going to turn this part over to my friend Kate Kressman-Kehoe, and she's going to walk us through the issues of climate change. Kate?
Thank you, Carol. And it's really nice to see everybody here. And I really appreciate people taking um, an evening to get informed about this. And can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Climate change is one of their biggest issues. They really want to get rid of any dealing with climate change. First of all, just starting with climate change is real. It's pretty simple. If you put certain gases in the atmosphere holds heat more. Rising emissions equals rising temperatures. This is something that's been known since the early 1800s. It's been tested, it's been proven. This is not a discussion we should be having to have. And when you, next slide. When you heat up the environment or the atmosphere, you get more storms, you get more droughts, you get basically weather disruption. You get flooding, you get fires. As Dawn knows well, you get hurricanes that are wiping out towns. It's a massive problem. 9 of the worst 10 years ever recorded for natural disasters have occurred in the past 10 years. Next slide. So the first thing they want to do is, even though we're having more disasters, they want to reform FEMA emergency spending to shift cost to the states. They want to kind of basically leave people on their own a little more. Next slide. And it's bigger than that because climate change is bigger. And I could literally spend an hour here, which I won't, talking about the many ways that climate change changes things. It's a systemic change, and so it has systemic effects. I picked this picture here. This is a house in Texas. In Texas, you need to water your foundation when it's dry, or else your foundation cracks, which causes problems like this. If you have a major drought, you can't water your foundation. It shows up everywhere. It shows up in how you need to design your storm systems. It shows up, how close to the sea you can build. It shows up what kind of things you can grow, where you can grow them, how much pesticide you need to use, how much fertilizer, what kinds of things you can grow. It breaks the oceanic food chain. It changes who has access to fresh water. It's something you have to plan for. Do we put air conditioning in the schools? How many cooling centers do we need to do? It changes emergency room planning. It changes financing. One of the first places that's kind of break is insurance. And if you can't insure homes, then you're going to start edging onto breaking the banking system. And all these things act globally. And so it also affects global politics, refugees, resource conflicts, and military security planning. So this is very big. Next slide. Last time, by noon, the Trump administration had scrubbed mentions of climate change from the White House website. A few months later, they'd taken out the EPA page laying out climate science. They tried to repeal the Clean Power Plan. They left the Paris Accords. This time, they are much more organized. There are, I think, 160 mentions of climate in Project 2025. And basically, there's kind of 4 things they want to do. Next slide. They explicitly say they want to bury the issue in those exact words. And they say the Biden administration's climate fanaticism will need a whole of government unwinding. And they've really looked at every place that somebody's trying to deal with climate change, and they want to weed it out. They want to stop tracking it and studying it. They want to stop people from talking about it. They want to stop people from planning from it, and they want to make it worse with drill, baby, drill. So next slide. First thing is stop tracking it. So basically, the atmosphere, the ocean, let's not study it. They want to dismantle NOAA. And to quote an environmental lawyer, to propose undercutting, breaking up, and streamlining NOAA is really an effort to block and make less available information about climate change in order to serve an agenda of climate change denial. Also, right now, the National Weather Service data is free. They want to commercialize it, which is going to set up a whole different range of incentives. And so when you think about, for instance, trying to prepare for something like Hurricane Helene, having to pay for things is going to be a problem. So all through the government, there are different policy research groups looking at different dimensions of this massive problem. And they want to weed out all of those. They also want to change how data is gathered and recorded. They explicitly say data continuity is important for climate research. So Basically, they want to change how it's done. Because there are instances where historical changes have happened in a setting, so you might do an adjustment so that you could make it congruent with the rest of your data. They're going to say, no, let's not do those adjustments. So what that's going to do is mean that you're undermining your ability to understand what's going on around you. They want to add diverse viewpoints, which is basically shorthand for climate deniers, to research boards. They want to prioritize military promotions for people who don't talk about climate change. And in terms of international policy, and they don't mention this, but I'm sure it's going to be true as well for any kind of research and community aid grants, they don't want to partner with anybody who advocates for climate action or also sustainability, which basically means how to make things last. So if you want to talk about sustainability, they don't want to talk to you. And they want to make the problem worse. They want to cut sustainability incentives for electric vehicles, renewables, power plant emissions. They want to eliminate mandates for efficiency. They want to expand liquefied natural gas, which is LNG exports, and they want more permitting for fossil fuels extraction. So what does this all add up to? Well, first of all, increased emissions, which is not the direction we should be going to. By altering or stopping data collection, we will undermine global science indefinitely, because it's once you've messed the data or not captured what's going on, you can't get that back. It's going to make it much harder for key sectors of society to adapt. You can't plan as much for things if you don't have data to work with. For instance, if you're trying to plan for a coastal city how high you need to make a seawall or any kind of defensive measure, and you have no forecasts of how high the sea is going to rise, that makes it much harder. It's going to undermine our global cooperation and diplomacy, and it's also going to undermine our ability to plan for our national security. So, I mean, the bottom line is they want to bury climate change, they want to unwind it, and that's just going to make the problem worse, because you don't make a problem go away by not talking it. So, having cheered you up, I'm going to hand you back to Carol.
All right, so I'm going to be talking about environmental issues. And one of the things that I want to mention here is that, Kate and I were trying to figure out the best way to do this, and we really focused on the biggest issues. There is so much more to this. It just, honestly, it is infused throughout all of Project 2025. There was very little on Agenda 47 because Agenda 47 takes a really broad stroke view of everything. But if you look at 2025, they go down into the, into finite details. So if you want to learn more, you should look at Project 2025. We're giving a really high level overview of the main policies. So the Environmental Protection Agency in the Project 2025's mission is creating a better environmental tomorrow with clean air, safe water, healthy soil, and thriving communities. That sounds great, right? Well, just as a reminder, the first time they rolled back more than 100 regulations that protected air, water, endangered species, human health. And now it says that the EPA's structure and mission should be greatly reduced, and they'll do significant restructuring and streamlining, not to mention the fact that there are dozens of agencies that have some role in environmental concerns that they want to eliminate completely or dismantle or put into some other area so that it can't be as obstructive. So this means that new appointees who will be set to go on day one are going to be trying to reform the agency's scientific research. So they're balancing these teams with technical knowledge, legal expertise, and political exposure. There's an emphasis on management and legal background over scientific knowledge. They don't need scientific knowledge to be part of these teams. They just need to be a Trump loyalist. They plan to reset the science advisory boards to expand for a diversity of scientific viewpoints, free of potential conflicts of interest. So those who are climate advocates and environmental groups will be left out completely. Throughout Project 2025, they consistently refer to a conservative EPA, meaning smaller and profit friendly. They are looking to make money hand over fist, basically. And the EPA will no longer be the all powerful energy and land use policymaker anymore. Again, part of this power goes to the president. He decides what the policy is going to be. It says that Biden forced the US to turn towards emission-free energy generation, making other fuels expensive. And I just want to mention that some of these other fuels and a green environment basically added over 300,000 jobs to the economy. So, this they think of this as a bad thing, but what's going to happen to those jobs if they have their way? One of the important things that it says is that the state, rather than federal, the state will have leadership rather than the federal government and rather than the EPA and any of the organizations involved. So they say the environmental choices belong to the people of the state who live there. So they get to vote on it. Their focus is on a thriving community. The EPA should reduce costs of its actions on local communities. So again, this is the focus on reducing costs and increasing profit. And they focus on compliance over enforcement. They're going to eliminate the Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assistance. So it's oh, please do the right thing instead of you must do the right thing. Project 2025 advocates withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord, which they did the first time. The Climate Accord addresses climate change with a goal of a net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. They plan a dramatic increase in offshore drilling and on public lands, endangering water, land, and wildlife. They have millions of new acres that they plan to open for drilling. They want to repeal tax credits for green energy initiatives and dismantle federal oversight of emissions monitoring, defund clean energy programs, research technologies, and industrial manufacturing. Again, this goes along with what Kate was saying, where they want to basically just pull anything to do with climate and environment apart so that we're not tracking it, we're not monitoring it, we're not reporting on it, we're not talking about it. This will be a really big problem. And just to remember, the officials who are in charge will be loyalists with a little scientific background who are concerned about money over what matters. So what could possibly go wrong? Remember Flint, Michigan? They switched the water source from Lake Huron to the Flint River to save money. Within a couple of months, the GM plant had to discontinue water usage because the chloride in the water was corroding engine parts. They had one of the largest outbreaks of Legionnaire's disease in history. That's a disease that is similar to pneumonia, and people were very sick and many died from it. The governor had to go to the president and ask for an state of emergency and receive $5 million in aid. But what is scary is this many years later, 2024, this happened originally in 2016. What is scary is studies that were done by Science Advances show that there's a measurable detrimental effects from the city's water crisis on children of Flint their mental health, and their school performance. So this has had long-term effect on people in Flint, Michigan. If you look at the air and water pollution, according to Project 2025, again, the primary role belongs with the state and the people who live in the state. Well, the problem with that is that there's 10 million new chemicals formulated each year. And once something like PFAS, which is polyfluoroalkyls, is out in the environment, it can't be contained. You remember that the mandate to put control with the states and their people rather than EPA oversight? Well, one of the problems is air pollution knows no state boundaries. And I downloaded this from a site on September 11th, 2024, and the darker colors were the air pollution at that point. And as you can see, anything that's in purple, orange, red, or yellow is pollution. And it just travels right across borders of states. So, one state problem affects the next state. This was a shot from July 2021 when the wildfires were so rampant. And again, as you can see, there's no state boundaries here. Pollution goes wherever it wants to. So let's look at water pollution. This is the Mississippi River with all of its many tributaries. Somebody up here decides they're going to do dumping in the river. Look at all the people who are going to be affected all the way down the river. That can happen all over if nobody is safeguarding. This looks at water pollution as it currently stands right now. This is any place that's got not color. Arsenic is present. This is where nitrogen is present in the water, and this is where industrial dump toxins are in the water. For the Office of Air and Radiation, there's a heavy emphasis on cost reduction. And they cite over control of upwind states to reduce emissions that affect downwind states. They're saying it's being over controlled. So they're planning to do away with the good neighbor policy where you have to be careful about the people that are downwind. So Project 2025 advocates returning standard setting to Congress. Do you think all these folks have the scientific knowledge to do that? Do you think they even have the time to investigate if they have the goodwill to do it? So let's look at food now. Environmental and climate concerns really affect the food seriously. And Project 2025 wants to remove the US from association with the UN and other efforts to push sustainable development schemes connected to food production. They don't want us involved in anything that's sustainability oriented. They're going to repeal the federal food labeling mandate, advising consumers of biotechnically engineered food. So they've fooled around with the organics of food, you won't know it anymore. They plan to repeal dietary guidelines because the guidelines have veered off mission and attempted to persuade the USDA and Office of Human Health and Services to adopt nutritional advice that focus not just on human health, but on the health of the planet. They don't care about the health of the planet. They want to remove those dietary guidelines. And they say that Biden administration has been too aggressive against pesticides and chemicals in his effort to promote the greening of agriculture and manufacturing. So, again, the guardrails are coming off. So what happens if the APA no longer has authority to be the environmental guardian? Imagine knocking on a door in an emergency and no one is there to answer. And that's basically it. There's going to be nobody there to oversee that people are being responsible, companies are being responsible. That's a really big concern. And just to look at what's estimated if Kamala Harris gets in versus Donald Trump, if you look at jobs, Evergreen Action estimates that there will be an increase of 2.2 million jobs, whereas with Donald Trump, the jobs will go down by 1.7 million. With regard to the GDP, there will be a $450 billion increase, and with Donald Trump, there will be a $320 billion decrease. Energy costs under Kamala Harris will decrease by 7.7 billion, but under Donald Trump, they will go up by 32 billion. And with regard to climate pollution, they will go down by 24% with Kamala Harris, and they will increase by at least 19% under Donald Trump. So just as a reminder of some of the things that you can do if you are concerned about this as we are, you can talk to friends and family who are open to discussion and listen to their concerns and be empathetic, but be sure to share your concerns and your knowledge. Remind people they have a choice in their vote and only they know how to vote. You can write postcards. A lot in this group have written postcards. You can donate to the Harris Walls campaign. And you can canvass locally and even in swing states if you'd like. For example, there's a group of people from Rochester for Harris who are canvassing in Pennsylvania. So thank you very much for your attention. And Kate and I will answer questions now.
Thank
So
you so much, Carol and Kate. That was fantastic. It was scary as hell, but it was
Yeah, it is.
fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm afraid my part didn't do much to bolster people's and upbeat feeling about it.
Now we can talk about some of the things that we can do. Does anybody have any questions or anything that they want to say before I spout? Does
So,
anybody
so-
explode?
yeah, so Connor, for Vicky had said for a group of people who make such noise about being focused on the family, the current iteration of the GOP doesn't seem to be very interested in the health of their children and grandchildren. And then Nicole asked, what is the incentive for Trump conservatives to get rid of the EPA? Is it money or is it something else?
Well, part of it is money and part of it is that it's business. You know, it's big business. The big businesses don't want these controls because it costs them more money.
They don't want the EPA to share any of the information. And, you know, back during the last Trump administration, scientists were so concerned that they actually took a lot of the research and stored it in Canada because the Trump administration wanted to do away with that. If I may, one of the things that I read earlier today was we're all thinking about North Carolina. And one of the things that happened in North Carolina, it's very unusual for a hurricane to hit Western North Carolina. That's weird. But a lot of the devastation, the houses that have been swept away, and a lot of the devastation that has happened, towns being wiped out, North Carolina for the last 15 years has been deregulating a lot of the building requirements, building on slopes, what kind of foundations you need, what are the building standards. And so if we don't have the regulations in place, and the reason that the legislature did that was because the building lobby and the construction people and the people who wanted to make money off of building, it's expensive to meet all of the rules. It's expensive. It's more expensive for the builder to build a house that meets all of the safety concerns. And they persuaded the state legislature. And so they said, okay, we're going to do this. And now we can see what happens. When you look at some of the hotels that collapsed in Florida, it's deregulation that allows these things to devastate people's lives.
Well, I think you mentioned something similar, Carol and Kate, about the Michigan, right, in the water supply.
Right, right. And that's like started basically 8 years ago when they switched the water over from the lake to the river. And I don't know. I mean, I think the effects of that change are going to be at least two generational because the kids who are coming up now are having problems as a result of it. And if you want to see a film that will be a really big wake up call, watch the film Dark Waters. It talks about the DuPont use of the chemicals that created Teflon and how it's basically gotten out through the entire, I mean, the people in the community were dying of cancer and it was covered up. But the chemicals that they were using has really, it's gone all across the world.
Very scary. I thought I saw Dawn take her mic off. Did you want to say something, Dawn?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, by the way, thank you for the presentation.
Mhm.
You know, like in Flint, Michigan, I mean, the decision to change the water source was financial. I mean, that, and when you think about the reason folks don't want EPA is because they don't want to have to pay for the extra cost associated with the regulations. And, you know, in North Carolina, not only do we have that obviously in the western part of the state where that's a concern, but, you know, on the eastern part of the state at the coast, where we've got, you know, beach houses that are literally falling into the ocean because of the erosion, and they're still wanting to continue building, which is just nuts. And I'm trying to think what the particular comment was that Donald Trump made not long ago, but it was something about, you know, the good thing about this, you know, when these things happen is you get more oceanfront development. You know, like it frees up space for more oceanfront development. Like that's the solution. It's just crazy making.
And speaking just about climate change, it just drives me crazy that there's such effort into denial, because I'm not saying that every progressive solution has been clever or that we're going to get things right the first time. But if one side is trying to solve things and being imperfect human beings and doing some things great and some things maybe not so much, and the other side just saying it's not happening, that's just a recipe for disaster.
I've actually had the same thought, and I know I'm stepping on you there. I'm sorry, but I've had the same thought as I've really dug deep into this document. It's not like they're saying, well, okay, we're going to kind of ignore you people over here with your green initiatives and that, and or making a case for kind of what we're actually really doing is simultaneously having fossil fuel be developed and used while we're working on green initiative. It's the deep need to wipe it all out. That is part of this. I wanted to jump in really quickly because I've got an international example of what regulation can do for a population and what happens when it isn't, when there's regulations, but there's no enforcement. And some of you already in this group already know that I have family in Japan. And in 2016, my son had just started a job at a university there, had taught 6 class sessions when a massive double earthquake happened. I, long distance, had helped him pick out an apartment, which was a new build apartment. In the middle of some of this stuff, he was on camera with me. He thought it had settled down, and I saw the walls behind him swaying. And I said, look, buddy, back out into the street with you. And he, you know, of course, did that. And so his area really did have a fair bit of damage. And there were deaths and there were injuries. So it's not like the regulations that Japan had put into place for earthquake safety prevented all death and injury or all property destruction. But compared to the earthquake that of a very similar magnitude that happened just days later in Ecuador, where it was just devastation, there's just no comparison. In the prefecture where he was, they were able to right the ship of that area reasonably quickly afterwards, where Ecuador, this region in Ecuador, where they had regulations, they had building regulations, but they had no enforcement mechanism for them. It took them years to get out from underneath that level of destruction. And and, many more people died and many, many more people were injured. So, I was really glad to see that you were emphasizing that it's not just having the codes and the regulations, it's also having teeth to them in some respect.
Right.
So,
Thanks.
Susan, I know you were trying to say something and I stepped on your
No,
comment.
no worries. It gave me a chance to put my thoughts in order, even as I was listening to you. I know this is focusing in on the EPA, but I'm also thinking about how 2025 overlaps perhaps between agencies or overlapping with agencies. For instance, I was immediately thinking about deregulation with the railroad industry, and I was thinking about the terrible environmental impact of East Palestine and other communities where they've had train wrecks. And that's probably just one example, but it came to mind as the presentation was being made toward the end. Does anyone have a handle on 2025 and how there might be some impacts, like with the overlapping of agencies and environmental impacts there?
All I can say is that if, for instance, there is a climate component to, say, railway regulation, they'll take that out. So if, for instance, if you have tracks in a place that are vulnerable to some sort of flooding, sea level rise, then they will probably remove that.
One of the other things that I saw was in looking at the Department of Agriculture, they said we need to remove all environmental issues and take it out of any concern, because obviously climate doesn't have anything to do with agriculture, which sure, they're taking all of the international stuff, any accords that we're doing, they're pulling all of that out. Anybody in the state, they're going through and checking all of our ambassadors. And the ambassadors that go to France, to England, to Australia, to our allies, to the UN, are all, it says right in Project 2025, they should all have a close personal connection to the president. He's putting his people in, and he can do a lot of the placement of his people without even Senate approval. So it's horrible.
One of the things that I find very ironic is the fact that they want to pull all of the guardrails off. They don't want to talk about climate change. They don't want to talk about environmental issues. But it's not like this is a US thing. This goes across the globe. And in his speech or his debate the other night, JD Vance said that the US was, one of the cleanest countries, and that in fact is not true for emissions. They are like the second worst after China. And the thing that kills me is like, okay, so all these people in Africa or South America, all of a sudden they're going to have these terrible droughts, these terrible rainstorms where agriculture is going to be destroyed and people are going to be trying to escape. But we're not going to be welcoming anybody because we're going to send all those immigrants home. It's very ironic.
It seems like it also would overlap with the FDA, right? And
Mhm.
environmental concerns and the plan to do away with the Food and Drug Administration and regulations about food crossing state borders and
Right. And baby food.
baby food and formula
Mm-hmm.
and everything except contraceptives, I guess.
If you remove the EPA from the equation and the states have to take care of themselves, which kind of trickles down to municipalities being responsible for their water and regulations. Doesn't it mean that the wealthier communities will have better water? It suggests that the wealth will be able to afford whatever they need.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're talking about, super wealthy people
Right.
who can, I mean, if, I don't know what they would do about getting another planet if this one gets so borked it can't support life very well. But in the meantime, you know, these people have private jets, they have yachts, they have the ability to travel to places and stay there for long periods of time, in ways that most of the rest of the planet does not. So I literally think they don't care.
They care about money.
They
They
do.
care
They
about
do very
their
much.
own money.
Yeah, because that gets them all of the things I was just listing, right?
Yeah.
The yachts and the travel and the multiple homes and different locales and.
The only thing that I did want to say, Judy, about water and wealthy communities, a lot of people in this area have summer homes up in the Adirondacks. And prior to some of the regulations about the good neighbor stuff, the acids that was airborne from, you know, how many people remember acid lakes, right? And they died. The Adirondacks was going to die because we were getting the pollution out of manufacturing plants to the west of us, western states across the country, Ohio, and you know, all the way along. And that's what they're trying to do away with. They want the states to be able to decide, because then the states that are not doing well might very well go into production and have fewer regulations.
So
So
it's
I'm
really,
gonna
this
talk
whole thing is about the consolidation of money and power. And so when the people who are in power and have all the money, are looking at our planet or looking at our country, like, what does that give them? I don't even understand, like, it's such a cost to humanity that it seems like you know, you're going to be in charge of desolation and devastation.
Yeah.
Sounds
That's
like Putin.
Yeah, actually. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about this next week, but I wonder how many of you caught that kind of throwaway line in the transportation chapter, where the author of that chapter is making a recommendation that we stop federal subsidies for mass transit and leave it up to the localities and the states to start up mass transit. Well, why would you be against mass transit? It's because you want to sell a lot of
Cars and oil.
gasoline, right?
Mhm.
And automobiles. But also just kind of never delves into, well, how is mass transit actually funded? I'd invite people, if you're interested, to go look it up, because how many individual communities can really set up a mass transit system for themselves without help? And a mass transit system that's very effective. I mean, you could have a little tourist line go around to downtown or something like that, but which some communities do have, but this takes billions of dollars to do this. And there is a lot of upfront costs, but to wipe out federal subsidies means, except in the biggest communities, kind of wiping out mass transit development,
Mhm.
which she seems fine with. Under this notion of let the people choose, which I think is a really devious way of talking about this, under the notion of like choice, the states' rights, that argument back from centuries ago, you know?
Well, and then, when you have a state that's chosen one way and they experience the devastation that comes as a result of their lack, who's going to pay for that?
Right.
Is the federal government going to pay for that, or is the state going to pay for that?
And where are those people going to go? You know,
Exactly.
you're going to have I mean, I think we already are seeing, there's been a fair bit written about climate migration happening already, starting domestically, people moving out of California, for instance, after those devastating wildfires. And so other states will presumably take these people in. And it's, it starts to become, people are so worried about people coming in from other countries as being a burden. But what about if you have a whole bunch of people coming from the states that have been very badly affected, moving into states that may, just by luck or also by regulation, been able to handle these things better? I really believe in the maps you were showing us, and I don't think there's any state that's going to be able to do a fabulous job of this, but there probably will be states that will do a better job than some other ones.
Well, they're even talking about here in Rochester, the fact that we have a more conducive climate. It's cooler, and even in the summer, it doesn't get that hot. They're starting to see migration, people from the bigger cities moving here. And then what's going to happen to the people, the people that have less money? Where are they going to go?
Yeah, I think that that's an interesting problem for us, is that we're seeing, I think, the rich climate refugees first. And so that does a lot to housing prices and availability. And we are a climate safe destination, and we have a lot of fresh water, which is going to be a scarce resource.
Mhm.
So
Just
again,
wanted
all
to jump in.
different kinds of planning
Yeah.
you need to be able to do and talk about.
I just want to jump in for a second, and some of the people who maybe are not as pushy as I am, Barb and Louise, Rachel, Paul, Nicole, what kinds of things does this bring to mind for you?
It's ludicrous. It's just, I mean, how you think, I was texting Lisa, I mean, health, like our personal well-being starts with clean air, clean water, and food. And all of those things are going to be riddled with toxins. And there's nothing you can do about it if your air is
There
dirty.
is something we can do about it.
I mean, there
November
is, but I
5th,
mean,
we can do
yeah,
something about it.
I totally
Don't
agree.
give up hope.
No, but I mean, it's ludicrous to think that those things don't cross state boundaries. And I guess what kind of goes through my mind is, how does the European Union, I mean, because then it's almost like okay, you hear the argument, take it back to the states. And now we know with abortion, what that means. And then it just reminds me that all the states are just like different countries. And what does the European Union do? And how they handle it, because they have the air pollution and the water pollution and the I'm a health coach, so I think a lot. I have done some research on the glyphosate and the other things that the European Union, I'm not sure, they were looking at banning glyphosate, was the last I heard, but a lot of other things, pesticides, they have banned in the European Union that we still use here.
Right.
I mean, and that stuff travels 600 miles in the groundwater. So that's my personal thought. It scares the bejesus out of me.
Nicole, I see Paul has his hand up.
I'll just comment on the plan of the Trump administration to increase housing to build on federal lands. And I mean, there is no infrastructure there. So think of all the blacktop. They've got to have water there, all these things. It's not going to be any more affordable. And it's going to impinge upon clean air, clean water, forestation, things like that. So, I mean, that's an absurd thought, and it's not where people have jobs. Oh, that's just my comment.
Yeah, it's, I thought the comment about that was, yeah, again, crazy, ludicrous, and that the illegal immigrants are taking our homes and driving up housing prices. And, it's hard for most people, most young people to get into buying a house today. And where are all the illegal immigrants getting the money to do it? They're able to do it, and regular American citizens are not able to do it because of them. It's all just such a fabrication and fear tactics, and we're going to just tear down all the systems that can ensure, that can get in the way of us making more money. Us that are like up there, not us.
Everyone here sees exactly what this is all about. Everyone here is concerned about it and cares. What I feel disturbed about and don't know what to do about is that people who have been listening to Fox News and drunk the Kool-Aid think that we are perpetuating false news. This isn't real. It's all fake news. We're wrong. And he's the only one that's good for the country. How do you break through that? Because this group here is kind of an echo chamber. We all are on the same page. But when you listen to them, it's not that way. And I am terrified as well. And I don't know what to do about it when that's what we're up against.
I think we really need to bring in the young people, because they're the generation that is really going to see devastation, and they have to get on board. And we have to, really
Well,
get them
maybe
on
not.
board.
How do we do that? I mean, I've talked to my kids, but I'm an old lady, and so I don't know how to talk to young people. Anybody have any good ideas about how to do that?
Well, they do have that
Between that person right there. Sorry.
one that there is an organization that, what is that, Lise, that Doug something, that he's trying to bring in a lot of young people. I've donated to that.
Oh, Leaders We Deserve.
Yeah.
Sure, right.
David, is his name David Hogg? Is that
Yes.
the one you
Yeah.
mean? Yeah. But I don't think we can do anything, Kitty, about the person who has spilled the Kool-Aid down their shirt. That person's
Yeah,
gone.
that's really impossible. Things.
What we can do is, there's a lot of people who are not going to vote. It's not that they are going to vote for Trump. It's that they're not going to go to the polls because they don't see any effect that it'll have on them. They're going to be fine. They live in Rochester. They live in Pennsylvania. They live in Wisconsin. They're not going to have major issues, although there were forest fires and devastation in Wisconsin even. I think the thing that I'm trying to do is say, I remember when we had Love Canal. I'm old, you're young, but I remember when Lake Erie could be set on fire. That's what it was like without regulation. And that's the reason I have these concerns. And I think the more I can tell, I don't know if it has an effect. Does it have an effect, Rachel? When I talk to people, I'm trying to say, this is my concern. Can you feel that? I don't know if it matters. I don't know.
I'll say that I talked with my son, who's in Eastern Massachusetts, fairly regularly. He's 37. He and his wife believe this is an existential threat, and they are going to New Hampshire on Sundays, going door to door. So we can't give up on the young people. I'd be interested in hearing whoever is representing the Monroe Young Democrats, what the Young Democrats are doing.
Yeah, they're not actually on tonight.
He sets this up for us. Yeah, Avi is a wonderful guy who sets this up for us, and he's the head of the Young Democrats, and they are very involved. They have a lot of postcards that they just got. They went through all the postcards they had, so they got like 20,000 more. So they have postcards, and Avi would love to have anybody who's interested in postcards you can send an email to Rochester for Harris, write out the word for Rochester for Harris at Gmail, and he will set you up with postcards. Oh, somebody has their hand up.
So Rachel was gonna speak next.
Let me see if I can remember what I was going to say. I was thinking about how, speaking to young people, I think there are also a lot of really current examples of climate and environmental disasters that are probably more relevant than the ones that you were mentioning, like thinking about how, I mean, one thing that really resonated with my students this past year, and my students are not voting age, they're 14, but things that really resonated with them were things like, who I don't remember who was talking about the railroad regulations from earlier, but coal trains going through communities and how that already impacts cancer rates and healthcare in communities, especially of color. I think what Judy was also talking about in terms of the oh, sorry, baby brain. I apologize. Words are really hard. But I'm gonna just go ahead and blame him for everything for a little while. But
You can do that till
idea,
they're 20.
the idea
We're
that there's
older.
going to be massively differential impacts of all of these issues on communities of color, on low income communities in rural and urban areas, that I think really does resonate with a lot of young people, because they're seeing these things happen in their communities, and they're seeing how, like, every aunt that they've ever had has had lung cancer and none of them have smoked, you know, things like that, where they're the lack of regulation on industry is not an old story, and things that I see resonating, like, so that's just one example, but another one was the glyphosate that I think Nicole was speaking about, like those particular issues, if you're looking at ones to like highlight with people, are really good ones. And then Paul, to your point, like, it is an existential crisis, and I have someone's future that I really need to be concerned about, and thinking about what kind of world he's going to be living in. And we're down in Virginia, but it's already very hot here. So thinking about, you know, how much further inland the hurricanes are going to get, things like that.
Rachel, where are you?
Richmond, Virginia.
Thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And in terms of getting young people involved, also tune in October for the education one, because I'll be speaking then.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think,
With
let's see,
mom.
Susan, were you going to say something too? Thanks, Rachel.
I was just thinking about all the universities that we have here in town, and I'm thinking that particularly U of R, there must be absentee voters from other states. Is anyone aware of what's happening at the U of R specifically? Environmental clubs there, you know, getting out the vote there. Anyone know about that stuff?
I'm on the steering committee for Rochester for Harris, and I do know that Avi is also on the steering committee. There are people reaching out to the colleges, but if you have contacts at the colleges, more the merrier. But yes, we want to be sure that we're coming up on the deadlines to make sure that you're registered. And if you have children and if you have anyone in a swing state, tell them to go to vote.org and double check, triple check often to make sure you're registered and you know where you're voting and how you're voting. One of the most important things to do is, if you find somebody who's inclined to vote for Harris, make sure they tell you what their plan is. Tell me, oh, you're going to vote. That's great. When are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? Are you going to do it by mail? Are you going to go in early voting? You're going to go to Susan B. Anthony House on the first day of early voting? What are you going to do? Make your plan. And because that increases the likelihood, if somebody articulates a plan, it increases the likelihood that they will follow through phenomenally. So the more you can make it real for people, the more it'll work. But there are some people doing it at the colleges, Susan.
So
But more, you could do more.
I retired from U of R 6 years ago, so I'm certainly not on campus a lot now, but I do have lots of friends there, and I'm on the newsletter, email lists and so on. And I can tell you, the students there are pretty activist. I can't speak directly to the level of activism of students on other campuses, but U of R students are, and there have been a number of voter registration drives there and voter education. I'm less concerned about getting out the vote at U of R as I am in places like the community colleges, where I think, people. I mean, there's a little bit of dorm life in the community college campuses, but not a lot. Most kids come and go to class and then go off to work and then go to their homes, which are off campus. So I think getting out the vote or even just raising awareness for those students is so much harder than it is in residential campuses.
Thank you.
Yeah, Connor, thank you for asking the question. Yeah, I'll just say, to reiterate what Vicki just said, my profession is higher education, and I've worked probably with over 24 colleges and universities as a consultant as well as a staff member. Generally speaking, it's absolutely correct that mainly the residential schools tend to have the resources and also centers for civic engagement and clubs that can connect to residential students. Once they get off campus, though, it's another story. And so it's capturing the attention of students who have other lives besides going to college or going to classes, especially Monroe Community College, where I also worked at one point. The students generally are just not residential. They have other things going on in their lives. So capturing their attention, I think is particularly critical at places like that. That's not to say, though, that the efforts aren't being made, because they also have a student center, they have student activities, they have clubs and organizations there. But I think it's harder to capture their attention as much because they have other things going on in their lives. And they may not prioritize the voting as much as perhaps students in other places. But most colleges that are residential or have a large residential population have a lot of civic engagement efforts. They usually devote resources in all those places for centers for civic engagement and also volunteerism and things like that. So I suspect the area colleges have it well in hand, except I do kind of wonder a little bit about the community college. And I'm really glad you mentioned that, Vicki, because I think I may take a visit over there and put Post-it notes in the restrooms or other places.
I had a bizarre remembrance before I got on, and that was back in 2016 with Hillary and all the flash mobs. I even took involved in one.
That's awesome.
And and that was fun. I don't know, did it drive votes? But this is so serious. We have to be able to it's maybe late because we only have 30 some odd days, but that whole idea of, and I love that song, the one with the dance, the flash mob, that feeling or whatever that song was, can't stop that feeling. Like, wouldn't it be cool to do something about like that? It was just an odd thought about having a little fun while we're in such a bad state.
Yeah, flash mob. I love the idea.
A voting flash mob. I love it.
Yeah. And, we also do want to, in these forums, make sure that there are ways that people feel that they can do something, know that they could do something. What is it that what can I do in order to forward what we hope to have happen in November. Connor mentioned the postcards, the canvassing. I saw a thing today, I think it was on Red Wine and Blue, about doing a phone bank. There's a phone bank training. I did that a number of years ago, and that was really pretty easy. So that's another way to do it. I love the idea of a flash mob. I love the idea, and I'm gonna go on the first day of early voting in Rochester to the Susan B. Anthony House. And like, I think if we set a time and everybody get a great big group of people to show up, we could do a little flash mob there.
Yeah. What are the details about that? I know Connor had mentioned it, but what are the exact details? Do you need an absentee ballot to do that?
No. It is, if you live in Monroe County, early voting starts on October 26th. Susan B. Anthony House is one of the places that you can do early voting. It starts at 9 a.m. And there, if you go to the Monroe County Board of Elections, you can confirm all of that. The other things that I'm going to urge people to do is go canvass with Rochester for Harris down in Pennsylvania. I'm going to go again on the 19th. They have some free buses that are going down. You go down, you come back the same day. Susan has done it. Deb has done it. Kitty has done it. It's easy to learn. Do it with friends. Take people with you. It's great. So that's a great thing to do. As I said earlier, Avi's got postcards. And if you want to get on the email list for Rochester for Harris, Facebook has a lot of the information about all the events. And if you can't do Facebook very well, which is me, I can't do Facebook very well. But if you want to do more, get it in an email, send an email to Rochester for Harris, which Lisa put the address in the chat. What are other people doing?
I realize that we're maybe going over time, but I just wanted to put in one thing more about early voting. I am not too worried about disruption at the polls where we live. But I think that this is got to be on people's minds in more contentious states, to the point where I'm concerned that some people may use that as a reason not to vote at all. So I think we all have lots of people that we know who live in other states. So to find ways to gently inquire if they would consider early voting, or, I mean, my friends that live in other states would crawl over broken glass to vote. But to get them to encourage other people in their area to vote early, if that's an option where they are, to take away that what has now become kind of guarded feeling about going to the polls in some location. Or even just like, oh my God, it's exhausting to go to the polls under the kind of circumstances that have happened in some recent elections. So to reach out to people in other states.
Connor, do you happen to remember what Tess said at the meeting about if you do encounter a problem at the polls? She said, don't leave, but who do you call?
You don't leave, you call either the Board of Elections or you're going to be contacting, you don't leave, you ask the people who are working there for a provisional ballot. And that's important. So yeah, and there are lawyers on call, and lawyers are traveling to other states to do this too. There are lawyers on call to help you if you have to go to court and get an order. That's why I vote early. And then this year I'm going to volunteer and take the day off from work. So, and hopefully I won't have to do anything because everything will be smooth and fine. But just in case, I mean, this is something that my husband has done. That's why I yelled to him. I did want to tell everybody that these conversations happen every Thursday between now and Halloween. And next week, remind me, what's next week?
Economy.
The
Economy.
economy. So we have the economy coming up, we have education coming up, we have reproductive rights coming up. LGBTQ is on
Harry
a
Bronson.
Tuesday. That's the one that's happening on Tuesday because we couldn't schedule Harry Bronson. And anyway, we have two speakers who are coming, but they couldn't do it on a Thursday. So
Carol
thank
Ebersol
you.
Weiss. Yes.
Thank you. Thank
Bronson.
you. So that's going to happen on the 15th. So remind people about that. And Carol and Kate, thank you so much. This was really, really good and a great conversation. Thank you to everybody who's coming. This has been good and it just keeps getting better, I think, every week. So the more the merrier. You can go and if you should be getting the PowerPoints sent to you at the emails. And Carol is posting. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.